From 2018 to 2023, the world shut down due to the Big C. Small businesses collapsed, people were forced out their homes, and many people lost their lives. In 2020, riots and protests ran through America, and law enforcement and glorified waste of space took the lives of many. In JJK, the Shibuya incident sealed Gojo and resulted in the ending of many teens and adults. None of these tragedies compare to the silent killer that plagues the basketball community. Winning bias. With accolades and legacy talk being the crux of basketball discussion, you'd think people would have more sense than to glorify and amplify the perception of players just as soon as they've won, because the impact they would have on their legacies is consistently overstated, yet somehow we keep doing it and we don't realize the impact it has. Winning bias is the Cinderella of the NBA community. Everyone in her village knew she existed, they probably knew she was being mistreated, yet everyone acted like she didn't exist, despite it being the most important factor in NBA discussion. Winning bias not only forms current day opinions, like the best in the world, the best young star, the most potential, etc., but is genuinely the heart of all-time talk. Literally, the most famous argument in the GOAT debate is 6-0 is better than 4-10. Then people will act as if they have no concept of bias in their arguments. Now, while I think all-time talk and current day rankings are inherently different, the fact is that they're intrinsically tied together, like Nina and her dog. You can't evaluate their career without analysing where they've been. So when you look at current day rankings, is winning bias ever inserted? Like a key in a hole? I don't even have to go far. I can reference from the 3 years in this decade alone. So let's rewind the clock to the start of 2020. LeBron is finally washed after being injured in 2019. Giannis is considered a choker after losing 4 straight games in the conference finals to the Toronto Raptors. The Golden State dynasty is officially wrapped up. Kawhi is the best player in the world, which is winning bias right there, but whatever. Since then, who has been affected by winning bias the most? They would be the main characters of our story: Jimmy Butler, Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid. So let's start with... Every time I close my eyes. 2019, Giannis had won his first MVP, was the 1 seed in the East, and was considered a top 5 player. All at 24 years old. But one mountain he had yet to conquer was the playoffs. So much so that he was on the brink of being classed a choker because in 4 playoff trips, he only made it out of the first round once. And the one time he made it out the first, going all the way to the conference finals, he got shut down entirely. The MVP, the potential best player in the world, in the conference finals, averaging 23 and 5 on 4 turnovers, on 45% from the field, 60% from the line, and 51% true shooting. The MVP. Around this time, the no skill, he just runs and dunks, if Giannis was 6'3", he'd be at McDonald's narratives were prevalent, and he was proving them right. When coaches would specifically scheme for him, he was taken out of the game entirely. Maybe you could attribute this to team construction and management, but regardless, stars that consistently perform poorly aren't looked at highly long term. This was exacerbated by next year in the bubble, where he lost to a Miami team whose second best player was rookie Tyler Hero. Someone who averaged 13 points in the regular season. Again, they were losing because Giannis underperformed, because the star not only didn't step up, but he crumbled, because the only game they could win was the game Giannis left early. Giannis' stocks plummeted. The choker narratives were in full effect. They were calling him a run and dunk merchant. James Harden was giggling because he wasn't the main choker in the NBA anymore. It was long. So after another regular season where he played like an all-time great, we awaited the playoffs to see if he could finally prove himself. Not only did he win his first ring, he came back from 2-0, he had one of the greatest finals performances in NBA history, and he won finals MVP. So how did his narrative change? The first major one was he's now the best player in the world. Since LeBron was getting eliminated in the first round, the title of best in the world had been up in the air. But winning it finally solidified it for Giannis. Despite playing worse and arguably running from the KD matchup in the second round, he was still dubbed the best in the world. Contentious or not, his performance in the finals made the title well deserved. But give a narrative an inch and they will go all throughout history. They were saying Giannis was the best power forward ever. I'm not even going to debate the validity of this argument. I'm just going to list some all-time power forwards. Tim Duncan, 19-year career, 15 all-defensive teams, 5 rings, 3 finals MVPs. Dirk Nowitzki, he revolutionized basketball, the greatest ring ever, the greatest shooting big ever. Kevin Garnett, the greatest defender of all time. Throwing Giannis over them after one successful playoff run, despite them all having comparable if not better careers than him, shows the individual value of the championship, regardless of the context, as well as how crazed winning can skew people's opinions, which is even crazier when you realize that since that ring, the Bucks have been favored to win, yet he hasn't made it to the conference finals yet, even losing in the first round this year to... Do you remember the perception of Jimmy Butler in 2020? It wasn't good. I'll give you some reminders. He was called toxic, he was called a bad teammate, and they called him a locker room cancer. All this coming off the dramatised debacle in Minnesota, where he whooped the stars with niggas that don't get minutes, then went to Philly and beefed with the front office, resulting in him landing in Miami. The media hated Jimmy. They called him vindictive, they called him a bully, not a team player. Then he went to the NBA Finals in his first year. On my auntie's grandmother's daughter's sister's son's life, I have never seen someone turn face so fast. Suddenly he wasn't vindictive, he was driven. Suddenly he wasn't a bully, he was a modern day Kobe. Suddenly he pushes his teammates because all he wants to do is win. And while I don't doubt these for a second, I think Jimmy wants to win. A guy doesn't start training 15 minutes after losing a finals to play a practical joke on the owners. He really wants this shit. But how does a player's narrative change from one playoff run when the players themselves haven't changed? In Minnesota, he was trying to push his teammates and was complaining that they didn't want it bad enough. In Philly, he complained that the front office wasn't doing enough to win, yet they still dubbed him a locker room cancer and pulled a complete 180 when he started winning, without regarding how it affected his perception. Cause going from calling Jimmy Butler a top 5 player to then becoming an afterthought after getting swept in the first round the next year isn't heard of without injury, yet it happened to the Jimmy-led Heat. Now, after gassing him up that highly and him falling off that dramatically, you'd think the fans, the media and basketball fanatics would learn how to properly evaluate players. But guess who's back in the top 5 conversations after making the finals again? Guess who's the clutchest player in the league after beating the Bucks team that had no Giannis? Guess who's the best small forward in the league again? Jimmy Butler III, the man with 0 rings. That's the thing that makes it even crazier. He didn't even have to completely win to feel the effects of winning bias, cause Jimmy still doesn't have a ring. He didn't even get to hold a trophy because instead of holding the next one, he lost in 5 games to
this man just, I don't want to do this no more.
Jokic's aura is very Kawhi-esque, due to the fact that he's extremely under the radar but extremely good, which limits the discussion around him greatly. Only limits, not negates, because the media will always find a way. First, there's the endless debate of who's the best center in the league, between him and wait, not yet. Anywho, because the center position is arguably the weakest position in the modern NBA talent-wise, these two are eternally trapped in a conversation of if Nikola's playmaking is more impactful than Joel's defense, if Jokic can be better than Embiid despite being one of the worst defenders in the NBA, if Embiid can be better than Jokic if he keeps losing, going around in circles and circles with none of them giving the viewer a definitive answer until now. Specifically to that last question too. No, Embiid cannot. Which leads us to our second narrative. Is he the best in the world? In the past 3 months since Jokic won his championship, the conversation of his ranking has gone from potentially being the second best center in the league to being the undisputed best in the world. To show the disparity in perception, look at the MVP race. Consistently, people were saying that Giannis deserved the regular season MVP over Jokic and have been calling Giannis the best player in the world since he won his title. But despite Giannis only playing 2 games in the playoffs, in which he played well in both those games, coincidentally, when the title changes, the title changes. Not to make it seem like Jokic doesn't deserve his title, it's actually an extremely valid take, but his positioning isn't solely based on his performance, because while he played well, his performance would be put over the moon if we compared him to
another milk. Help!
Joel Embiid has seen the adverse effects of winning bias, where if you consistently lose, you are seen as worse than you are, and this year was amplified due to the voters' narratives. By this point, we've all heard about the process, the successful restructuring of Philadelphia through patience, draft picks, and tanking. Now with Joel Embiid in his prime and Ben Simmons entering it, the 2020 should have been Phillies to conquer, yet to this day, they haven't made it out the second round. Now I want to pose a question to the audience. How should we evaluate losses? When do you put it on the shoulders of the team or the leader? Do you say it's LeBron's fault for losing? Or do you say that D Wade and the rest should have picked up his slack? Do you say Giannis is a playoff choker? Or do you say he needs more help? Do you blame Ben Simmons for passing up a dunk? Or do you blame Joel Embiid for not stepping up? I ask this because Embiid has never played well in the playoffs. He's probably the most consistent choker in the entire NBA, while Ben Simmons was passing up dunks. In the same series, Embiid dropped 17 points on 20 shots in Game 4 and 22 points on 24 shots in Game 6. The year prior, he got swept in the first round and couldn't average 20 points in the entire series. This is who Joel Embiid is. This is who Joel Embiid has been in his entire career, yet the discourse around him only took notice this season, the season he won his first MVP. This year the excuses finally ran out. Before it was the bubble or Ben Simmons or a mid-season trade or something, but when Embiid finally won the MVP, after years of finishing second or third and even being snubbed, Finally winning it magnified the impact of his losses, and the fallout became even greater. This loss in the second round brought back all the sins of his past, because all of a sudden Embiid is a playoff choker, he's a pity MVP, and I've seen people going as far as saying he's not a top 10 player, when barring the last statement, this has always been the case. When the narrative is such an important reason as to why he won the MVP, where it spun webs of lies and stories like Ben Simmons was holding him back and you can't keep repeating MVPs, collapsing in the playoffs as he did emboldened the narrative to turn against him just as it once helped him. That's winning bias, because Embiid hasn't changed. He's always been injured in the playoffs, he's always shrunk in the playoffs. In fact, he's only got better as a player. But now, because there's no plausible excuse for the media, the effect of winning bias is hitting him harder than ever, and his perception may be skewed for the rest of his career. I mean, have you heard of a pity MVP before Joel? I hadn't, even though there's been one before him. But if you want to see more about that topic, click this video here. If you like the video, like the video. If you don't subscribe if you want, and I'm done. Okay, bye.